Before we dive into the shadows of this high-stakes operation, if you enjoy uncovering the hidden layers of intelligence history and the invisible wars fought behind closed doors, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We are peeling back the curtain on the world's most secretive agencies, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Now let's go back to Tel Aviv. The year is 2011. The location is the headquarters of the Mossad, often referred to within the intelligence community as the aquarium, due to its glass-walled meeting rooms and the sense that everything inside is swimming in a pressurized tank. The air conditioning hummed, a low, constant drone that battled the sweltering Mediterranean heat outside. Inside a secure conference room, the atmosphere was frigid, not just from the climate control, but from the tension radiating between two senior division heads. On one side of the mahogany table sat Eli, a veteran of the Human Intelligence Division. Eli was old school. He believed in boots on the ground, face-to-face recruitment, and the tangible reality of physical assets. He wore a rumpled linen suit and had the weary eyes of a man who had spent 3 decades looking over his shoulder in European capitals. Across from him sat Sarah, the rising star of Unit 8200 Liaison and the head of the newly expanded Cyber Warfare Division. Sarah represented the new age. She dealt in zeros and ones, zero-day exploits, and the belief that a keyboard could inflict more damage than a car bomb. She was sharp, impeccably dressed, and held a tablet like a weapon. The subject of their disagreement was Project Obsidian, a newly discovered, highly fortified research facility deep within the Zagros Mountains of Iran. Intelligence reports indicated that the Iranians had successfully air-gapped the facility, meaning it was completely disconnected from the internet. No phone lines, no Wi-Fi, no data cables going in or out. It was a digital island, and inside, a team of 12 elite physicists was weeks away from a breakthrough in centrifuge stabilization. "You can't code your way into a mountain, Sarah," Eli said, tossing a dossier onto the table. "This requires a physical entry. Sabotage. We need to get a team in, or at least recruit a scientist to plant an explosive. The old ways are the only ways that work in a fortress like that." Sarah didn't flinch. She tapped her screen, bringing up a 3D schematic of the facility's ventilation systems. Physical entry is a suicide mission. The Revolutionary Guard has 3 perimeters. You send agents in there, they don't come back. But every fortress has a key. I don't need to blow up the centrifuges. I need to break the minds of the men running them. I can shut that facility down without a single gram of plastic explosive. The director of operations, who had been silently observing the exchange from the head of the table, leaned forward. He was tired of the interdepartmental bickering. "We don't have time for a debate," he said, his voice gravelly. "The window is closing. If they stabilize those centrifuges, the timeline shifts dramatically against us." Eli scoffed. "She wants to send a ghost into a machine that isn't connected to the world. It's a fantasy." Sarah looked directly at Eli, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "Let's make it interesting then. Give me 48 hours. If my team can't halt operations by Friday, you get the green light for kinetic action. You can risk your agents. But if I succeed, the Cyber Division gets the next 3 years of the discretionary budget." The room went silent. It was an audacious gamble. The budget allocation Sarah was demanding was massive. It would shift the agency's focus permanently toward digital warfare. Eli narrowed his eyes. He was a gambler, but he calculated odds. He looked at the schematic of the isolated bunker. "An air-gapped system? In 48 hours? You're on. But when you fail, I want your resignation on my desk alongside the budget transfer." "Deal," Sarah said. The director nodded. "You have 48 hours. The clock starts now. Do not make a noise. If the Iranians suspect an attack, they will lock down even tighter. I want this program erased, not just delayed. Make it disappear." The meeting adjourned. As Eli walked out, confident in the impossibility of the task, Sarah remained. She picked up her secure phone and dialed a number. "Get the team," she said. "We're going fishing." 3,000 kilometers away, the Zagros Mountains cast long, jagged shadows over the valley floor. Deep beneath the rock, shielded by layers of reinforced concrete and lead, Dr. Farhad Rostami adjusted his glasses and looked at the telemetry data on his monitor. Rostami was a brilliant man, a physicist who had trained in Europe before returning to his homeland. He was also a man of immense pride. He viewed his work not just as a job, but as a national duty. The facility, known internally as Site 4, was his kingdom. He ruled over the 11 other scientists with an iron fist, demanding absolute perfection. The isolation of Site 4 was its greatest strength and its greatest torment. The scientists lived in an adjacent complex, cut off from their families for months at a time. No personal phones were allowed, no internet access. All entertainment was pre-screened on DVDs. The psychological pressure was immense, acting like a pressure cooker on the team. Rostami thrived on it, but the younger scientists were fraying at the edges. "Check the variance on Cascade B," Rostami barked at a junior technician, a young man named Amir. "I see a 0.04% deviation. Unacceptable." "It's within safety limits, Doctor," Amir replied, his voice trembling slightly. "We are not aiming for safety," Rostami snapped. "We are aiming for mastery. Recalibrate it. Again." Rostami turned back to his station. He felt safe here. He knew the Israelis and the Americans were watching. He knew they wanted to destroy this place. But he also knew the architecture of the security. The air gap was absolute. To infect his systems, a spy would have to walk into the server room and plug in a USB drive. And no one entered the server room without a biometric scan and a two-man rule escort from the Revolutionary Guard. The facility was a sterile white world of humming machinery and cold fluorescent light. It felt impenetrable. But Rostami had a blind spot. He understood physics, he understood nuclear dynamics, but he did not fully understand the human need for connection. Back in Tel Aviv, inside a windowless room lit only by the glow of 20 monitors, Sarah's team was dissecting the psychological profiles of the 12 scientists. They weren't looking for vulnerabilities in the facility's firewall, because there wasn't one to hack. They were hacking the people. Target 1, Rostami. Narcissist, perfectionist, workaholic, no hobbies, one analyst read out. Dead end. Target 2 through 5, married, religious, strictly vetted, hard targets. "Let's look at the bottom of the food chain," Sarah commanded. "Who is the weakest link?" The analyst pulled up the file of Amir, the junior technician Rostami had just berated. Amir Vahidi, 26 years old, PhD candidate, loves Western classical music and retro video games. He's been flagged twice by internal security for trying to bring in unauthorized books. Sarah leaned in. "He's bored, he's isolated, and he's terrified of his boss. That's our bridge." "But he's inside," the analyst argued. "We can't email him, we can't call him." "We don't need to," Sarah said, her eyes scanning the file. "We just need to give him something he wants, something he can't resist bringing inside with him." The plan was forming. It relied on a tradecraft principle as old as the Trojan horse. If you can't break down the wall, get someone to open the gate for you. But they had to do it without the target ever knowing they were an agent of destruction. "What is the one thing Amir Vahidi wants more than anything right now?" Sarah asked. The analyst scrolled through intercept logs from Amir's last authorized leave. He's been trying to find a rare, specific recording of a 1960s symphony conductor. He posted about it on a forum 6 months ago before he went dark. "A collector's item." Sarah smiled. It was a thin thread, barely visible, but it was enough. "Find that recording. And then, we're going to build a weapon inside it." The weapon Sarah's team needed to build wasn't a bomb. It was a piece of code so sophisticated, so lightweight, that it could hide inside the metadata of a high-fidelity audio file. They called the code the Whisper. Unlike previous cyber weapons like Stuxnet, which were designed to physically destroy machinery by making centrifuges spin out of control, the Whisper had a different objective. Its goal was psychological warfare. It was designed to alter the data displayed on the monitors, creating a dissonance between what the machines were doing and what the scientists were seeing. "If we blow up the machines," Sarah explained to her team of elite coders, "they will know they were attacked. They will replace the machines, secure the facility, and start again with more anger. We need to make them believe they are failing. We need to make them doubt their own math. We need to make Rostami turn on his own team." The coding marathon began. The atmosphere in the Unit 8200 room was intense. Pizza boxes piled up, coffee flowed like water. They had less than 40 hours left. The whisper had to be perfect. It had to bypass the antivirus software used by the Iranian facility, software that the Mossad had purchased through a front company years ago to study. It had to remain dormant until it detected the specific operating system of the centrifuge controllers. And most importantly, it had to hide itself. If a diagnostic was run, the whisper would simply vanish, moving into the RAM, leaving no footprint on the hard drive. "It's a ghost," the lead coder muttered, typing furiously. "It doesn't exist until it screams." While the cyber team worked on the digital payload, the operations team had to solve the physical problem. How to get a physical object, a vintage-style digital audio player loaded with the infected file, into the hands of a man inside a sealed bunker in Iran. Amir Vahidi was currently inside the facility, but intelligence indicated that a supply convoy arrived every Tuesday. The drivers were vetted, but they were civilians. One of the drivers, a man named Kazra, was known to run a small black market side business, smuggling cigarettes and DVDs to the bored scientists. "We can't approach Kazra directly," Sarah said. "If he gets spooked, he reports it. We need to introduce the item into his supply chain." They identified Kazra's supplier, a shop owner in a dusty bazaar in a border town near Iraq. The shop owner, unwittingly, was about to become the most important piece of the puzzle. Sarah contacted a synonym, a helper in the region, a Kurdish merchant who had done favors for the agency before. The instructions were simple. Go to the shop that supplies Kazra. Sell him a box of confiscated luxury goods for pennies on the dollar. Make sure the digital audio player, preloaded with the rare symphony and clearly labeled with a sticky note saying, "For the music lover," is right on top. It was a bank shot, a gamble upon a gamble. The shop owner had to buy the goods. Kazra had to see the player. Kazra had to know Amir wanted it. And Amir had to be foolish enough to plug it into a work computer to listen. "It's too many variables," Eli said when Sarah briefed him at the 24-hour mark. "You're relying on a chain of coincidences." "I'm relying on human nature," Sarah countered. "Greed, boredom, and desire. They are more predictable than any circuit board." The border town was a hive of activity, a place where the lines between nations blurred into a gray zone of commerce and smuggling. The heat was oppressive, mixing with the scent of diesel, spices, and unwashed bodies. Farid, the Kurdish asset, walked into the electronics stall, owned by the man who supplied the site driver, Kazra. Farid played the part perfectly. A desperate man looking to offload goods quickly. "My cousin's truck was stopped," Farid told the shopkeeper. "I have a box of high-end electronics. Players, drives, cables. I need to move them today. I'll give them to you for 20% of their value." The shopkeeper's eyes lit up. Greed, as Sarah had predicted, was the first lever. He inspected the goods. They were pristine. On top lay a sleek, high-end audio player, encased in a velvet pouch. It looked expensive. "Done," the shopkeeper said, handing over a roll of cash. 3 hours later, Kasra's truck rumbled into the market. He was a large man with a thick mustache and the confident swagger of someone who had access to places others were forbidden. He stopped at the stall to pick up the weekly order of cigarettes and snacks for the facility staff. "Got something special today, Kasra," the shopkeeper said, lowering his voice. He pulled out the velvet pouch. Digital player, high fidelity, loaded with classical music. "You know that kid inside, the skinny one with the glasses? He's always asking for this stuff." Kasra took the player. He turned it over in his heavy hands. "Amir? Yeah, he never shuts up about his symphonies. How much?" "For you? A favor. Just remember me when the contract renewal comes up." Kasra grinned and shoved the player into his pocket. "The kid will pay double for this." Thousands of miles away, in the cool air of Tel Aviv, a single pixel on a map turned green. A tracking beacon embedded in the player's casing had moved. It was traveling northeast, towards the Zagros Mountains. "The package is moving," the operations officer announced. Sarah stood with her arms crossed. "Phase 1 complete. Now we pray for bad traffic." They needed the truck to arrive during the night shift, when the security protocols at the outer gate were slightly more relaxed, and the senior guards were often taking tea breaks. If the truck was searched thoroughly, the electronics scanner might pick up the anomalous circuitry of the tracker. The truck wound its way through the mountain passes. The sun set, casting the peaks in purple and black. Inside the dashboard of the truck, the Trojan horse was humming quietly, waiting for its destination. The entrance to Site 4 looked less like a laboratory and more like the mouth of a dragon. A concrete tunnel bored into the side of the mountain, guarded by heavy steel barriers and watchtowers staffed by the IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Khosrow slowed his truck to a halt. The searchlights blinded him for a moment. He rolled down the window, holding out his identification. "Weekly supply," Khosrow grunted. The guard, a young conscript, checked the clipboard. "You're late, Khosrow." "Transmission trouble," Khosrow lied. "You want your cigarettes or not?" The guard waved him forward to the inspection bay. This was the critical moment. The truck would be scanned, but the player was in Khosrow's pocket, not in the cargo hold. "Step out of the vehicle," the guard ordered. Khosrow stepped down. A metal detector wand was passed over his body. It beeped at his belt buckle, then it beeped at his pocket. "What's this?" The guard poked the bulge in his jacket. Khosrow pulled out the audio player. "Music, for the scientists. You know how they get without their toys." The guard looked at it. It was just a music player. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a phone. It didn't have a camera. Strictly speaking, unauthorized electronics were forbidden, but the drivers and the guards had a symbiotic relationship. If the guards confiscated the goodies, the drivers stopped bringing the extra cigarettes for the guards. "Don't let the commander see it," the guard muttered, handing it back. "Get out of here." Khosrow climbed back in. In Tel Aviv, the tracking signal showed the device crossing the perimeter line. "It's inside," the operations officer whispered. Now, the hardest part remained. The device was in the facility, but it was still just a piece of plastic. It had to bridge the air gap. It had to touch the network. Khosrow found Amir in the break room 2 hours later. The young scientist looked exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed. "Hey, Professor," Khosrow whispered, sliding into the chair opposite him. "I got a surprise for you." He slid the velvet pouch across the table. Amir opened it cautiously. When he saw the screen and the file name listed, Vienna Philharmonic, 1964, his face transformed. It was the holy grail of his collection. "How?" Amir breathed. "Don't ask," Khosrow winked. "Just don't let Rostami catch you." Amir clutched the player like a lifeline. He went back to his station. The work was grueling. He needed an escape. He looked at his workstation. The audio port was on the front of the terminal. It was strictly forbidden to plug in outside devices. The penalty was immediate termination and interrogation. But Amir was tired. And Rostami was in a meeting. And the music was right there. Just for a minute, Amir thought. "I'll just listen while the simulation runs." He reached out and plugged the USB connector into the terminal. The moment the connection was made, the whisper woke up. It didn't announce itself. There were no flashing warning screens. To Amir, the headphones simply filled with the lush, soaring strings of the Vienna Philharmonic. He closed his eyes, letting the music wash away the stress of the bunker. He was in heaven. But deep in the kernel of the operating system, a microscopic packet of data was extracting itself from the music file. It utilized a zero-day vulnerability, a flaw in the Windows operating system that the NSA and Mossad had discovered but never publicized. The code burrowed into the system's registry. It identified that it was on a peripheral node. It began to scan for the central server. It moved silently, jumping from Amir's terminal to the local switch, and then, using the internal network protocols, it found the master control unit, MCU, that regulated the centrifuges. It took 3 minutes. By the time the first movement of the symphony ended, the entire facility was compromised, but nothing happened. The centrifuges continued to spin at 60,000 RPM. The pressure gauges remained steady. The lights stayed green. Sarah's team watched a mirrored simulation in Tel Aviv. They received a single ping, a tiny burst of data that the device transmitted back to the tracker before shutting down its transmission capabilities to avoid detection. "We have capture," Sarah said. Her voice was steady, but her pulse was racing. "Initiate Phase 2. Phase 2 was the gaslight. The virus didn't attack the machinery, it attacked the data stream. It intercepted the sensor readings coming from the centrifuges. It recorded a loop of normal data. perfectly balanced, safe operation. It began feeding this pre-recorded loop to the monitors in the control room. To the scientists, everything looked perfect. The screens showed green lights. The graphs showed optimal efficiency. But in reality, the whisper began to send micro-commands to the centrifuge motors. Speed up by 1%, slow down by 2%, oscillate frequency. It was subtle. It created a vibration, a harmonic dissonance. The machines began to shake, imperceptibly at first, then with growing violence. Amir took his headphones off. He frowned. He felt a vibration through the floor. He looked at his screen. The screen said everything was stable. "That's odd," he muttered. Dr. Rostami walked onto the floor, his lab coat crisp. He sensed the tension immediately. The hum of the room had changed. It wasn't the smooth, high-pitched whine of the centrifuges he was used to. It was grittier, thrumming. "Report!" Rostami barked. "Readings are nominal, Doctor," a senior scientist said, pointing to the main display. "Pressure is stable. Rotation is perfect." Rostami placed his hand on the glass partition overlooking the centrifuge hall. He could feel the glass trembling. "The readings are wrong," he said softly. "Can't you feel that?" "Feel what, sir?" "The vibration. It's off balance," Rostami yelled. "Shut down Cascade A for diagnostics." They shut it down. They ran diagnostics. The computer came back clean. System health, 100%. Rostami stared at the screen. He knew machines. He knew physics. If a machine vibrates, there is an imbalance. But the computer, the infallible brain of the facility, said there was no imbalance. "It must be a structural resonance," the senior scientist suggested. "Maybe the ventilation fans?" "Check everything," Rostami ordered. "I will not have imperfections." They spent 6 hours checking the physical mounts. Nothing was loose. They turned the system back on. The screens showed green. The vibration returned, slightly worse this time. The virus was learning. It saw them shut down, so it paused. When they turned back on, it waited an hour, then ramped up the interference again. It was behaving like a gremlin, mocking them. In Tel Aviv, the clock showed 30 hours remaining. "They are confused," the analyst reported, reading the intercepted power usage spikes, which they could monitor via satellite thermal imaging of the mountain's power grid. "They are shutting down and starting up repeatedly. They are chasing ghosts." "Good," Sarah said. "Now turn up the heat." She typed a command. The command was relayed to a satellite, which beamed a high-frequency burst at the mountain. The signal couldn't penetrate the bunker, but it could hit the repeater station Kazra's truck had passed. The repeater station was connected to the facility's external power regulation. It was a long shot, a way to send a pulse to wake up the deeper level of the virus. The virus received the trigger via a fluctuation in the power line voltage. It executed the next subroutine. Randomize. It was 3 a.m. in the Zagros Mountains. The night shift was quiet. Amir was back at his terminal, anxious. He had hidden the player in his locker. Suddenly, the main display screen on the wall flickered. For a split second, the numbers scrambled. Instead of rotational velocity, the screen displayed a string of nonsensical characters. Then it flashed back to normal. "Did you see that?" Amir asked his colleague. "See what?" "You're tired, Amir." 10 minutes later, it happened again. But this time, it wasn't random characters. The screen displayed a single message in Farsi. "System error. User incompetence detected." It stayed for 2 seconds, then vanished. Amir froze. It said user incompetence. "Don't be stupid," the colleague said. "Computers don't insult people." Then, a centrifuge in the hall let out a high-pitched scream, metal grinding on metal, and then went silent. The emergency klaxons blared. Rostami burst into the room, still in his pajamas. "What did you do?" he screamed at the night crew. "Nothing. We touched nothing." Rostami looked at the monitors. They were all red. Then, in a wave, they all turned green, then blue. Then they went black. The virus had taken control of the user interface. It was no longer just hiding. It was performing a show. It was making the system appear possessed. "It's a glitch in the control software," the senior scientist stammered. We need to reboot the main server." "Do it!" Rostami yelled. They rebooted. The system came up. It looked normal. They restarted the centrifuges. 5 minutes later, the monitors began to display the personal emails of the scientists. Emails they had written months ago on the outside internet. Emails that should never have been on this air-gapped system. Rostami saw an email he had written to his wife, complaining about the incompetence of the Ministry of Defense. It was scrolling across the main nuclear telemetry screen, his face drained of blood. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "We are air-gapped." Paranoia struck the room like a physical blow. If the system had their personal emails, it meant the system had been compromised from the outside, or it meant one of them was a spy. Rostami looked at his team. He didn't see scientists anymore. He saw traitors. "Who did this?" he hissed. "Who brought a connection in here?" Silence. No one dared to speak. Amir was trembling so hard his teeth chattered. He thought of the music player. "Oh God," he thought. "It was me." The chaos in Site 4 descended into madness. The machines were mechanically fine. The virus stopped damaging them physically once the psychological damage began. But the scientists refused to turn them on. They were terrified. Every time they touched a keyboard, the screen would mock them, or show them private data, or display false readings that threatened a nuclear meltdown that wasn't happening. Rostami was pacing the room. The Americans? The Zionists? How did they get in? He ordered a complete physical search of the staff. The guards came in. They stripped the scientists. They searched the lockers. They found the music player in Amir's locker. Rostami held it up. "What is this?" Amir was weeping. "It's just music, I swear. Khazra gave it to me." Rostami plugged it into a diagnostic laptop, one that was isolated from the main network. The laptop screen immediately filled with a laughing skull icon. "You idiot," Rostami whispered. "You destroyed us." But the damage went deeper than the software. The virus had deleted the last 3 years of research data. It wiped the hard drives, but it did so in a way that looked like an accidental format command initiated by Rostami's own user account. When Rostami checked the logs to prove it was the virus, the logs showed only his name. User, F. Rostami. Command, delete all. The virus was framing him. "I didn't do this," Rostami shouted, slamming his fist on the desk. "The logs are forged." The security commander of the facility looked at Rostami with suspicion. "The logs say you did it, Doctor. Maybe the pressure was too much for you." The seeds of distrust were fully bloomed. The security team didn't understand code. They understood chain of command. The logs blamed Rostami. Rostami blamed Amir. Amir was catatonic. The facility was paralyzed. No one dared to touch a computer for fear of being framed next. In Tel Aviv, 46 hours had passed. Eli walked into the cyber operations room. He looked at the main screen. It showed the thermal output of the facility dropping to near zero. "They shut it down," Sarah said, leaning back in her chair. She looked exhausted but triumphant. "Did they destroy the centrifuges?" Eli asked. "No," Sarah said. "Better, they destroyed the team." Inside Site 4, the situation had become untenable. The ministry in Tehran had been notified of the sabotage. The secret police were on their way to interrogate everyone. The scientists knew what happened in these interrogations. They knew that incompetence was treated as treason. Panic set in. 2 of the senior scientists feigned heart attacks to be evacuated. Another tried to flee the compound on foot and was detained. Rostami was placed under house arrest in his quarters, screaming that he was being set up. The facility was effectively empty of intellectual talent. The machines were there, silent and cold, but there was no one left who trusted themselves or each other enough to run them. The program hadn't just been paused, it had been decapitated. The trust required to operate such a high-stakes facility had been shattered. It would take years to vet a new team, to clear the software, to rebuild the data. "We didn't just break the code," Sarah told Eli. "We broke the culture. They will never trust a screen in that building again." The virus had one final instruction encoded in its DNA: suicide. Once it detected that the system had been powered down for more than 4 hours, It initiated a self-deletion protocol. It overwrote its own code with random zeros. It cleaned the registry. It vanished. When the Iranian cyber defense teams finally arrived from Tehran 2 days later, they found nothing. The hard drives were blank. The logs were corrupted. The music player Amir had used was smashed to pieces by Rostami in a fit of rage, destroying the physical evidence of the vector. The investigators were baffled. They concluded that it must have been a catastrophic localized hardware failure, compounded by human error and mass hysteria. The report to the supreme leader was humiliating. The program has ceased due to gross mismanagement and internal sabotage. Rostami was disgraced and removed from the program. Amir was imprisoned for negligence. The other scientists were dispersed to low-level teaching positions. Site 4 was shuttered for renovations that would last indefinitely. Back in the aquarium, the mood was jubilant, though silent. There were no champagne corks popping. That wasn't the Mossad way. Just quiet nods and the shuffling of papers. Eli walked into the director's office. Sarah was already there. "Well?" the director asked. Eli sighed. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a single high-quality Cuban cigar. He slid it across the desk to Sarah. "You win," Eli grunted. "The facility is dark, the team is scattered, and you didn't risk a single agent's life." Sarah took the cigar, smelling it. "It's a brave new world, Eli. You handle the humans. I'll handle the ghosts." "The budget transfer is authorized," the director said. "Unit 8200 is now the primary spearhead for Operation Olympic Games." Eli turned to leave, but he paused at the door. "One question, Sarah. That music file, the symphony. Why that specific one?" Sarah smiled. "Because, Eli, the piece Amir was looking for, it was called The Unfinished Symphony. I thought it was poetic." Eli chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Poetic. Remind me never to make a bet with you again." "No promises," Sarah said. As the sun set over Tel Aviv, the lights of the city flickered on, a vast network of connections and signals. In the shadows of that network, a new kind of war had just been won. A war fought not with bullets, but with belief. And in the mountains of Iran, a billion-dollar facility sat silent, guarded by men who stared at blank screens, afraid to press a single button.